Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you today. As always, we have the hot drama fresh off the presses from the Donald Trump trial. Michael Cohen has just testified and been cross-examined by the Trump counsel as he was a witness for the prosecution. Also, Ibrahim Raisi is dead. The Iranian president died along with some of the top foreign ministers and just general government and political ministers in a recent helicopter crash. We'll give you all the latest on what that means for Iran and the broader region because it is a very, very consequential development. Also, we have condolences really from the U.S. that drew a lot of attention with regards to that. Also, the ICC warrant is out, really massive stuff. If, you asked me, would you ever see an arrest warrant from the ICC from Benjamin Netanyahu? I would say no. Well, there is one today. We'll tell you what it all means for Israel and Hamas, as there was also one for Gallant on the Israeli side and for the top three Hamas leaders. We'll get into all of that and also the pretty disgusting United States reaction to it all. Give you the latest here from the trial of Donald Trump for hush money on a pivotal day in the first criminal trial of an American president. The courtroom threatened to spin out of control. The prosecution's star witness admitted to stealing from former President Donald J. Trump's company. Trump's courtroom entourage included 3 supporters charged with felonies of their own, and the defense's only real witness was so defiant that the judge, after excoriating him, cleared the courtroom. The trial's first 5 weeks featured dramatic descriptions of sex and scandal, and the final phase of testimony on Monday showed no signs of let up as the courtroom played host to a nonstop spectacle. The tension came to a head as the prosecution rested its case. The defense called its witness, Robert J. Costello, a lawyer who had once advised Cohen. So defense saw Costello as a foil to Cohen, Trump's one-time personal lawyer and longtime henchman. But the strategy may not have paid off. The judge promptly lost his patience with Costello, a prosecutor turned defense lawyer and fixture in New York's legal world. When Costello scoffed at one of the judge's rulings, "Geez," he said before mumbling a retraction, the judge grew irate. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, judges normally are not the biggest fans when you try and do that in their courtroom. They're, not people who are accustomed to taking any kind of BS, but it's all a question. It's all down to that jury that is going to be so psychoanalyze their whole backgrounds, their whole careers, for any signs of bias and any signs of an indication on which way they're going to vote. It's going to be a really, really pretty tough jury to be in. And again, this case is really all hinging down on one thing, which is it's really kind of crazy, which is, do we think Donald Trump is a good enough husband to his wife Melania that he cared enough to pay $130,000 to stop this information from coming out? And personally, if you're talking about it on the merits, I think it is definitely a weak case. He is a scumbag, and he, especially for this, nobody should be able, especially a president, who's somebody who's supposed to represent the best of our country, hypothetically, again, very, very hypothetically speaking, is supposed to represent the best of our country. It's not someone who should be put up there as someone who cheated on his pregnant wife or his, his wife just had his child, with a porn star. This is not somebody who we should be looking at as a good person. But talking about somebody like Donald Trump, who is an incredibly bad person, it was done so much worse to both the business world in terms of his practices there and just the country in general with his disdain for democracy. I really do think it is getting like Al Capone for tax evasion, and I think a lot of people are going to start to notice that. But again, this could be a big question. If we start to see some indictments from this case get handed down, or not indictments, but a verdict from this case that goes against Trump before the election. Again, that is a big if that were to happen. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how these kind of independent, more checked out voters are going to go, because of course you're going to have some of the low propensity voters showing up for Donald Trump, but a big thing that could dampen their turnout is a criminal conviction, because there's a lot of people who say they'll still vote for Donald Trump no matter what, but there are some people, and it does make sense, even on the kind of, Trump side of things, the people who are more likely to vote for Trump than Biden, it would still be a pretty severe blow for a good chunk of, not relatively a very, very small chunk of the Trump electorate, but for a good chunk of this group, it could really kind of pause and give them a little bit of a jolt. And I think for the broader electorate, for the kind of independents, for the people, the two-time Obama to switch to Trump voters in 2016, I don't think this is going to be, and it very well could be, I could be wrong on this, it could be, kind of don't come for him, at least if you come for him, though, get him with the real stuff type of situation for these, the real swing voters, the two-time Trump, one-time Obama type voters. That could be a real dynamic that's at play. But I think it also could be, this guy is really crazy. Biden really, really sucks. I think no one is going to deny that. But people don't want somebody who's really that crazy to come out and run the country. And, someone who is going through, we can't even campaign because he's always in court and doing all this craziness. It really, in just a pretty embarrassing display. The explosion overshadowed the performance from Cohen, who on his fourth final day on the stand fended off a fusillade of attacks from the defense. He was only the only witness to offer first-hand evidence directly linking Trump to the records that underpin the charges against him. Trump, he said, approved a plan to falsify the records to cover up a scandal involving a porn star. During Monday's cross-examination, Trump's lead lawyer assailed Cohen's credibility, painting him as a pathological liar, obsessed with taking down the former president. But Cohen maintained his composure, while some jurors seemed to lose focus as they shifted in their chairs. And when prosecutors received a second opportunity to question Cohen, they sought to blunt much of the impact of the cross-examination. Are you charged with any crimes in this case? A prosecutor asked him. No, ma'am, Cohen said, explaining that he was nearly there as a subpoenaed witness. Yet Cohen, the 20th and final person to take the stand for the prosecution, was not just any witness. He illustrated much of the prosecution's case as no one else could, harmonizing disparate facts to paint Trump as a criminal. Cohen took the stand amid a uniquely Trumpian display. An eclectic entourage of the former president's supporters, several legal troubles of their own, packing the courtroom. Alan Dershowitz was in attendance. Also, Boris Epstein, who is under indictment in Arizona for election rigging charges. Bernard Kerik, former New York police commissioner, who Trump pardoned for federal felony charges related to tax. And then Chuck Zito, who is a former Hells Angels motorcycle gang member, who is out in this situation. I think, again, the more this stuff gets advertised, the more it seems like Trump is really just somebody who is so crazy, has so many really deeply insane people around him. Like there are still, I think, a bunch of people who are going to see, and they're not just going to be these, suburban Democratic voters or, city-dwelling Democratic voters who are going to get weirded out by this stuff. This stuff is still, I think, it is still weird in our politics today. The fact that he's hanging out with, a former leader of the Hells Angels. So, again, some pretty ridiculous stuff all around, to be sure. All right, next up, today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Iran, a very big situation. Ibrahim Raisi and Amir Abdullahian, I think the foreign minister, who was a very, very big deal in the Iranian government, were flying in a helicopter over the weekend, coming back from a meeting with, I believe, the Azerbaijani president. And he was somebody, both these guys were probably two of the most influential people, most important people in terms of just the faces, both at home and abroad, of the Iranian government, for better and very, very many times for worse. And they have died today, are officially died in a helicopter crash. It is a really, really big deal for the region and it is going to be a big deal for Iran, which is going to be thrown into turmoil. Of course, I think it really definitely, I think it's 100% fair that a lot of people wonder and a lot of people ask about, oh, is this the CIA? Is this Mossad? Is this, whoever? Is this some sort of foul play? And yeah, I think it is always possible. Crazy things have happened. The CIA, Mossad have pulled off similar, operations. It's not something that is out of their reach to do. And especially with, some of the intelligence that Israel has, this is probably the thing that they do best is putting spies in places, infiltrating and kind of reporting back. Is definitely something they could do in the Iranian regime. But, I think it seems for all intents and purposes, even if, because we never really will, I guess, know for sure. I think it's important to say that all sides right now are saying this is an accident. Iran is not in any way, bringing forward evidence or really stamping their feet and saying, hey, this guy was assassinated. So I think that does play a pretty big role. I think this is pretty interesting here, though, as well. The United States released condolences for Raisi, which really drew some eyebrows in a pretty big way. Within hours of confirmation that Raisi, who had served for 3 years as Iran's president, was killed in a weekend helicopter crash, the State Department announced its official condolences for his sudden death. A terse statement issued on Monday under the name of State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller betrayed no grief for the Iranian leader, who, I think everybody knows was not a big fan of America. But he's believed to at least condone attacks on American troops by Iranian-backed proxy forces in Iraq and Syria, which is kind of interesting because apparently, according to some of the negotiations that Iran and the United States had been having in Oman, one of the big starting points or progress points that the United States was able to extract out of Iran, which is to draw down and put pressure on some of these militias that had been attacking troops in Iraq and Syria that were Iranian-backed to stop doing that, in exchange for, broader de-escalation in the region. And I think that is very interesting because it shows the kind of opposite of the narrative that they're trying to put in here about Iran's position in the region. And of course, it's very important to say that, this was somebody who really was a fundamentally evil, religious guy in terms of ideology. But I think it's important to say, and I think a contrast can be drawn about he was, especially in relative to the United States and Israel, he was a more rational actor in the Middle East, hands down. Not just him, but Iran, they were a lot more predictable. They were a lot more calm, really not responding to repeated Israeli provocations over the last 7 months, and really doing so in a way that was largely symbolic when they finally had to, when the embassy was struck. And, this obviously does not excuse in any way their really awful policy on, the women life freedom protests, the extreme lack of freedom that they are, putting their civilians under, but also the situation the U.S. has put Iran under is something that I would argue feeds that climate with sanctions and just genuinely making it way, way easier. Because a lot of people are, this whole, American posture, this smart liberal posture is that, all Khomeini does is just blame every single problem he has on the Americans. It's like, well, yeah, you make it a little bit easier, just a little bit easier, when you're putting him in his regime under the harshest sanctions, really, in modern history, for not even breaking a deal that the two countries, United States and Iran, signed, but because they stayed in the deal as Iran pulled out, the United States pulled out. Honestly, it really, that is something that if you were a hardliner in Iran, you could not have written a more anti-American narrative. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to concede, they're going to concede, we're going to make a deal to stop our nuclear ambitions, and then they're just going to break it 4 years later and put us back under even harsher sanctions. So it's like, you could not make a better case if you're a hardliner to say, look at what these people do, screw them, let's get after them. And that is, it's one part why, especially on the foreign policy front, we see the rise of the hardliners. But again, that is not related to the foreign policy side, where they have, I think, behaved in a way that is the most predictable, is the most, okay, we're here for the stability, but we want control over our own region. I think that is clearly what they've been after, and they have been exercising that in a way that is in one part, pretty subtle, not something that really steps on a lot of toes in a very open and visible way, but it is very, very effective, and it's something that it's a power that they're exercising really in direct contrast to the influence of the United States as this other kind of countervailing force in the all-important Middle East. So, yeah, with regards to this spokesperson statement here, the statement drew swift outrage from vocal critics of Iran's government, some of the crazy Iranian diaspora people who argued variously that the United States should say nothing at all or harshly condemn Mr. Raisi, something Miller proceeded to do later when questioned by reporters at a daily briefing. It underscored the tightrope the U.S. government must walk after a valid foreign leader dies, as it balances the need for empathy for populations who may be mourning against the need to speak the truth and clearly articulate American principles. Is a quandary U.S. officials have faced repeatedly over the years, the death of hostile dictators in places like Soviet Union, North Korea, and Venezuela, heart attack gun, shout out, and have handled in sometimes varying contorted ways. They're reporting from the New York Times. And again, especially with our next story that's coming up, the idea that, we really have to stand up for American principles just gets more and more laughable every day. It's like, come on, like, who are we really kidding here? Like, this is an absolute joke. We're not putting forward any principles that we're consistently 100% stand for. It's not happening. And it's really hard for people to get, we shouldn't get that worked up about, this sort of language when there is no serious, and it makes the language honestly seem really stupid when you get down to it, because there is no whatsoever. There really is no diplomatic avenue to get things back on track with Iran. In fact, especially in the wake of Trump, Biden, has really just gone straight down with the Trump doctrine, a complete and total, ignorance of Iran, casting Iran as an enemy for really no good reason. And if you are pursuing a traditional U.S. foreign policy, it would make sense to, continue to isolate Iran. But for, really just turning back on the steps that Barack Obama did in this area, pushing Iran back under these very, very harsh sanctions, doing nothing to try and reach out to the Iranian government around the period of election when we had the new election. Then there's going to have to be another election, and it could be even more of a hardliner person in the wake of all the threats that Iran is facing. And again, when you're in the most powerful country, you have to, in a certain way, when people are in such fear of you, take that first step, and it really could lead to good things. And that is something that Barack Obama, to his undying credit, and it's not something I'm going to say very often, but that is something that he was able to do. But like so many presidents who do these brave foreign policy moves, who go kind of against the grain of the established order, they are pretty quickly punished for it in a pretty severe way. And we could see Obama was, in this case, just in the same way that Biden really was for pulling out of Afghanistan. All right, so with that being said, we will move on to our next story, and it is a big one. We have ICC warrants. This is here from the BBC, from Jeremy Bowen, the international editor. Benjamin Netanyahu responded with fury to the news that he may face an arrest warrant for war crimes and crimes against humanity. It was a moral outrage of historic proportions, he said. Israel is waging just war against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. In a bitter personal attack, Netanyahu said Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, was one of the, I'll give you literally one guess, one of the great anti-Semites of our time. And I really would love to get in touch with some of the more liberal Jews who are in the liberal Zionists who don't even have to be Jewish to turn around and say, are we up to speed now with what Netanyahu's about in terms of cheapening the word anti-Semitism to get this point across? And I'm sure I get some reactions, but this is what he's doing. Like, this cannot be good for real anti-Semitism when you're saying the guy who is trying to stop the genocide in Gaza, who is the leader of the International Criminal Court or chief prosecutor, is one of the greatest anti-Semites of modern times. Like, that is ridiculous. That is really a dangerous situation and something, if I were Jewish, I would be pretty pissed off about. So again, these are arrest warrants here against Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Daif, and Ismail Haniyeh on Hamas, and Benjamin Netanyahu, and Yoav Gallant, which is pretty interesting because Gallant was put as this moderate guy. This guy was going to come in, he's going to change things, and of course, that was something that he completely has come out time and time again and disproven, with the human animals comment, with recent comments he made with regards to Rafah. In this particular ruling, he is something, he is just as anti-two-state solution. He does not want a Palestinian state, and he's saying that openly, just as much as Netanyahu or Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's just, has a little fancy military outfit. He has a stern face, when he looks at the camera. So people take him maybe a little less goofily than they would someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir. But it is really very, very apparent, especially if you look at some of his most recent comments, which we can do in just a sec here. They are really, really quite rough. So this is from Gallant. He said the United States understands there will be no Palestinian Authority in Gaza. There will be no Palestinian state, not in this government, nor with another government. I just want to make that clear for everybody. Nor with another government. Very, very kind of nice almost to make that clear. But he said it will not happen. So there you have it. At least he is being honest. And then again, this is the U.S. version of the moderate. This is the sensible person relative to Netanyahu. When you hear the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu, to quote Bernie Sanders, this is the person that they're thinking of as the alternative. This is someone who says, again, there will be no Palestinian Authority in Gaza. There will be no Palestinian state, not in this government, nor with another government. It will not happen. You cannot get more direct than that. I am sorry. But Hamas demanded withdrawal of the allegations against its leaders, claiming the ICC's prosecutor was equating the victim with the executioner. It said the request, and I think this is a very defensible point at least, so the request to issue arrest warrants for Israeli leadership came 7 months too late after the Israeli occupation committed thousands of war crimes. And it really is a pretty extraordinary statement by Khan to come out there. This is, again, the chief prosecutor. He said, no foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader, no one can act with impunity. The law, he says, cannot be applied selectively. If that happens, we'll be creating the conditions for its collapse. Again, these are people, and you see this, reaction as well in Europe. You see people are like, this is serious. We need to follow this law because it is there, and we just like having international law. It's something, if we let this go, we can't seriously play this game. I think this is what they're really deciding. You can see that with some of their reactions at this point. Joe Biden said it was outrageous to apply for arrest warrants. There is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas. I would agree with that. The IDF is far, far worse. Hamas demanded withdrawal, again, of these allegations, but Khan does not make direct comparisons to the two sides, except to lay out his claim they have both committed a series of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Again, this is also interesting because they have volunteered to come to Hamas, has volunteered to present a case for their behalf on to the ICC or the ICJ. I'm not sure whether it was regard to specific situations or it was regard to anything like that, or regard to more broader stuff. But it is very, very interesting to see. Would be very, very interesting to see them try to resist this in some sort of court of law and put something up, whether it be just to defend themselves or defend their resistance movement. But as they call it there. But I highly doubt it will happen like that. So again, very, very interesting stuff from Cohen here, who he said was like judges in Nazi Germany who denied, this is Netanyahu talking here, who denied Jews basic rights and enabled the Holocaust. His decision to seek arrest warrants against Israel's prime minister and defense minister were callously pouring gasoline on the fires of anti-Semitism raging around the world. So pretty strong stuff, to say the least. So I do want to play this. This was when Cohen announced it, he was with Christian Amanpour on CNN, and we can take a look at this conversation. A very interesting conversation here from Cohen, the top ICC prosecutor who made this indictment.
Dignity of the individual is the protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me.
Names.
We don't view it like that.
And again, we it's very, very important to pause that for a second. This guy, Kareem Khan, essentially saying that, I think a senior leader, we can rewind that back. It's important to rewind that back.
I've had some elected leaders speak to me.
Okay, elected leaders. But he essentially said elected leaders have gone up to him and said that this court, which is something that a lot of people have kind of hinted at the past in critiques of the court, have said that, it's just for Africa, it's for Putin, it's for people who are not on the side of the West. And this is clearly how the Americans view it, but it is very, very interesting and I really do think, and I may be, one of these people who's trying to always make something happen when, really, as the meme goes, nothing ever happens, but it really does seem like it could be a major inflection point for this dumb game, this mask that Americans are hiding behind. We care about international humanitarian law, we care about the rules-based order, but then when the rules-based order actually kind of gets turned around back on them, they're normally able to kind of skirt past it and say, it's something we have to do for the good of the moment. But when they're actually in the International Criminal Court and they are facing geopolitical hits due to the International Criminal Court and the enforcement of justice against them and kind of turn back on them, it is very, very interesting to see, how they will do this, how they will handle this mask of, this behind which is just acres and just unlimited reserves of contempt for all these other countries and for all these institutions, because they don't believe in the validity of them. They don't believe that they should exist. They just believe in them as tools for the enforcement and the essentially reproduction of United States power and just blindly following of United States interests, because that is what they've always been used for, and that is how the international system has been manipulated, especially since, really the wake of the Cold War. But we can see that is definitely changing, and we can see that this is really the first time that we've seen some prominent charges that the United States really does not want have come out. And I think that is a historic moment, but it's also going to be very, very interesting and very, very important, I think, really in a genuine way, to see how the United States reacts to the pressure of, this is really it. Like, do you stick with international law here, or do you say, sorry, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore, we got to protect Israel, this is no longer feasible, and what are the consequences that come from that? It certainly seems like they're going pretty hardcore to protect Israel, as with Joe Biden really going hard for that. But this could be a real, show of this whole rules-based border BS as it essentially falls completely flat.
And be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me. We don't view it like that. This court is the legacy of Nuremberg. This court is a sad indictment of humanity. This court should be the triumph of law over power and brute force. Grab what you can, take what you want, do what you will, and we're going to simply be we're not going to be dissuaded by threats or any other activities, because in the end we have to fulfill our responsibilities as prosecutors, as the men and women of the office, as judges, as the registry.
Yeah, so again, very, very fair point and a very, very impressive point from Kareem Khan, who is standing up to this BS and really probably faced some insane pressure, especially from, Lindsey Graham was one of the names that was thrown around as a possible person who said what that was, that really horrific comment. But, it is pretty clear so far he is hanging strong. All right, that's all we got for you guys today. It's Newsflash.